All right, so welcome everyone. If you're tuning in now, just you can comment in the chat. You can comment on Facebook if you're tuning in from there. Say what's up, say hi. And we have a lot of material to cover today, so let's go ahead and dive right in. My name is Nathan Amado. I'm founder of Original Human Movement. And Original Human Movement is my way of taking all the things I've learned over the years through movement, breathing techniques that we'll be talking about today, self-defense, all these things, and combining them into a system, a methodology to take the best, find what's useful, put it all together and share it with you guys. And the main area of what I teach is through MoveNat. And so we can talk about, what is MoveNat. And so MoveNat is a system. It's a natural movement system. And it seeks to align our fitness with our primal ancestors who are fit and capable by nature, right? So we take these natural human movement skills, and that's the way we train. And it goes beyond the movement, as we're going to talk about today. All movement starts with breath. And also there's a big mindfulness component there as well. And so that's the main thing I teach with Original Human Movement. I also have primal health coaching in there, and Wim Hof Method breathing techniques that we'll be going over today, and a lot of things like that. And for me, the reason for starting OM is I found that, there's something missing, the typical fitness, there's just something missing there. I tried all these different things, all these different modalities, and, you name it, from martial arts, boxing, yoga, Tai Chi, wrestling, and all these different things. And when I came across MoveNat, I knew this was the thing I really wanted to teach. And it felt like it was the whole complete picture for me. And it includes the full range of natural human movements, and that includes instinctual movements like breathing. And so that's what we're going to be talking with you about today. Breathing is really easy to convey through internet. We're going to give you some examples, and it's really fundamental to everything we do. So now with me today, we're co-hosting this power breathing masterclass is Charlie Deist. And we met at the level 3 MoveNat in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we did the level 3 MoveNat. Maybe he'll want to talk a little bit about that too, but it was an amazing experience. And from the level 3, we went on to do the aquatics the following year in 2018. And that was in Tampa. And there we worked with Vic, who you can see in the picture on the screen. And Vic is, simply put, he's a badass. I remember at one point when he was on Facebook sharing what he'd do. It's like every week he was doing some amazing things, jumping out of planes, I don't know. I think he was wrestling crocodiles at one point. Not really, but the things this guy does is amazing. But he's super skilled human, and he taught the MoveNat aquatics. He also teaches the MoveNat combatives, which I've also done. And so me and Charlie were also at that event, and we learned a ton there. You can see that swimming pool in the picture there. We've done a lot of techniques in that pool and out of the pool as well. There's a big emphasis in this on breathing technique and efficiency. And so Charlie here, we met at level 3 and did the aquatics together. And so what Charlie did is he took the principles that we learned there at the aquatic certification, and he brought it back with him to San Francisco, to the Bay. And he put an emphasis on practicing those breathing and swimming techniques. And Charlie went on to swim from Alcatraz Island all the way to the aquatic park in San Francisco, which is 1.5 miles. that's a pretty huge feat. I don't know how he did. I want him to talk about that more, because I would like to give that a shot too. That sounds very challenging. And this was even though he didn't swim even a quarter of that distance before in open water. So this is a huge feat. And what this really shows is that these breathing techniques can really change our bodies down to the cellular level, and they're very powerful, and they're all influenced by our conscious control. So Charlie will talk about now about how breathing has changed his practice, and then we're going to get into our favorite techniques, both from MovNat and other areas like Wim Hof and free diving and things like that. So Charlie, it's all you. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nate. I love the way that you frame your practice as original human movement. This, primal. It's true to our nature, and that's also what attracted me to MovNat. I think that fundamentally, our whole model, our conceptual model of exercise as a society, is broken. Mm-hmm. And before I found MovNat, I was stuck on the treadmill, both literally with my exercise and metaphorically, in terms of just feeling kind of like I was running this rat race, not really, not looking at the ways that we were maybe designed to move or that were intended to move. And so that's the big picture. We're going to focus in on breathing because that's the easiest thing to teach over the internet. It's harder to teach someone how to climb a tree on the internet. But above all, I think the outdoor component, whether or not people decide to go that route, can really connect you to your deep nature. Regardless of that, though, the breathing techniques that we're going to cover will help you better embody your mission. So you mentioned that swim that I did. That was kind of an impromptu thing, and I find that challenges like that are no longer the sort of obstacles that they used to seem. Instead, life is more of the grand game in a sense, and we get to choose our specific mission. But everyone's mission is embodied. Everyone can do more if they're physically capable. And even a very slight change in your breathing efficiency can alter your entire physiology. So it can make you more present to opportunities, whether those are related to movement or your career, whatever it might be, or your breathing can make you anxious and defensive. The outward manifestation, how we breathe, affects the internal reality. And so I think of breath work as a sort of moving meditation. And the beauty is that you can practice it at all times. You can use it to gain focus and clarity, sort of inspire you to think about what you might have previously thought was out of your reach. Mm-hmm. And it can help you think about, what to actually do, what it is that you need to do for your mission and how to do it. So I really like this quote from Lao Tzu. He said that a perfect man breathes as if he is not breathing.
Yeah.
And the reason this resonates with me is because the main corrective that we teach in MovNat related to breathing is to not over breathe. So efficiency with any movement is what's left over when you remove all the unnecessary tension, all the unnecessary muscular contractions. But we accumulate these bad habits over time, and the key to making progress is to gradually eliminate these bad habits through awareness of your body and through practice. Mm-hmm. So that the anti-Lao Tzu would be this sort of, a shallow breathing. It's up in your chest. It's taking a lot of breaths and too much air. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk more about that. But I want to make clear that I'm not here to say, you have to breathe this way. You have to breathe slower. Right. It's really about breathing on your own time with awareness. And all these techniques are not meant to throw you off and get you stuck in your head, but it is about making what's currently an unconscious incompetence, if you will, a bad habit that you're unaware of, making yourself aware of it, becoming aware of what the good habit looks like, and then eventually through practice, making it unconscious. So, we talked a lot about kind of deep breathing and what is deep breathing? Is it a hyperventilation? And I have a slightly different view of that. But before we get to that, I want to cover just some kind of quick housekeeping things. There is a free PDF version of the notes of this talk that we're giving away to all registrants. If you're watching this on the Facebook Live, you can just click the link to a little opt-in, and that'll get you just kind of looped into what Nate and I are doing with our respective MoveNet programs. But it's also a good reference for if you want to try these things and go into a little bit more depth on some of the techniques that we won't have time to cover, including one is a Russian breathing technique that I'm no expert in, but just to tease it, Systema is a Russian martial art, these breath masters who do incredible things with their breath. You can read more about that, get that guide. And I also want to mention we've got another gift at the end. We've got a discount code for people who want to sign up for the aquatics workshop. And I also want to mention your workshop coming up. You're doing, or it's not for a few months, but you're doing a 7-day PURA VIDA immersion.
That's it.
The Spanish for, what is that?
Pure life.
The Costa Rican Amado.
Yeah.
And you're doing that in the Costa Rican rainforest?
That's it. Yeah. In the pristine rainforest of Costa Rica, we're going to be out there, you know, moving, and we're going to be breathing, you know, practicing self-defense. Pure VIDA immersion is what we're going to be doing, and it's going to be diving deep into these areas. Yeah, so that's an amazing opportunity for people to really transform the way that they move, learning from a master of the craft. First, you have to learn how to do it consciously, but by the end of that week, the movements that you're practicing, I'm sure, will be built into people's subconscious. Yeah. We're going to try to follow that same pattern in this short little class, a little taste of Pura Vida, if you will, taking these breathing forms, making them, the forms that you're doing, maybe doing wrong. I don't like the word wrong, but if you're breathing in some of these ways that are typical, bring those into conscious awareness and teaching you some exercises to help make the improved breathing subconscious. So this saying, I want to start off, just take a deep breath, and I invite our participants to whatever way feels most comfortable to you. Just sit and take a deep breath as you understand that. I think we have a tendency to think of breathing as something fixed and instinctual. We do it automatically from the moment we're born to the moment that we die. And even babies, when you submerge them underwater, have this dive instinct that teaches them immediately how to hold their breath. So there is this component that's instinctual, but we also know that there's a voluntary component where we can change the pace or the depth of our breath. And as a quick exercise, when you take a deep breath, you might notice that there might be an inhale noise, or your chest might expand. But taking a deep breath in this way causes a fight or flight response, which is not a bad thing. It can even be adaptive in certain situations. But if you're being sedentary, if it is your default mode, then you're using more muscles than you need to, and you're sending a signal to your body that there's some sort of imminent danger. So there's an alternative to this, which is diaphragmatic breathing, and this is where you're basically breathing into your belly. You can kind of put your hands, put one hand on your belly, one hand on your chest, and try to, as you breathe into make it so your hand on top moves as little as possible, while your other hand moves out to inflate your stomach, and then comes back down. What that does is activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is sort of the opposite, the counterforce of the fight or flight. It's easy to overcomplicate things. So if you take one thing away from this, it's that a deep breath doesn't mean taking in a lot of air. The word deep in this context refers to the positioning of the breath. And so if you're breathing in to your diaphragm, that's a deep breath. It can be very measured. It doesn't have to be a big thing. And refer back to Lao Tzu, that the perfect breath is almost like you're not breathing at all. It's a very subtle movement. And then the bigger picture principle that we can extrapolate from this is that we often spend our energy on the wrong things. So maybe this is kind of a uniquely American attitude, applied to fitness. It's sort of the no pain, no gain, and we think that we have to brutalize ourselves in order to get back into shape.
we think that if a little bit is good, then more must be better. So we take a deep breath in until we feel ready to burst when we do breath work, and this ends up being kind of leading us to the cycle of over breathing, which in the long run is a stressor that causes aging and oxidation of our cells. Similarly with running, people think that if running is healthy, they should be running 10 miles a day or lifting weights every day without enough time to recover. But the reality is, if you're not doing the right thing, or if you're doing the wrong technique, then more is definitely not better. If you're running on a treadmill, you're wearing down your knees, so more is not better. If you're working on the wrong projects, working on the wrong tasks, more is not better. And especially with breathing, if it's just sort of garbage in, garbage out, if you're not paying attention and it's just sort of mindless, then more breathing is not better. So working out smarter, starting with the basic movements like breathing, can give you big results. The better way to think about breathing, and before we get into specific techniques, is think about this paradox where deep breathing, the natural way, should be instinctual. We should have become, we've become sort of alienated from our nature by all these modern stresses. And Nate, you pointed out in one of the email sequences leading up to this that when we're chronically stressed, we can almost forget how to relax. So breathing as a skill can be mastered through practice, and this focus on your breath produces an awareness which eventually becomes a subconscious habit. Now moving on to some specific techniques. First, this is just a general principle of MoveNat. This is taken from the book by Erwan LaCour, The Practice of Natural Movement. That initially on this path to unconscious competence, we start off in unconscious incompetence. Then we become aware of our lack of ability. We become aware of the defect in our movement. Then we learn the proper way and can perform it efficiently if we're mindful. And then finally, we can perform it efficiently without thought. So diaphragmatic breathing. You see at the bottom of the lungs, there's this little squiggly red thing. That's your diaphragm. It sits beneath the lungs, and it's a cone-shaped muscle that becomes flatter as it moves down and contracts, drawing the lungs open. And because lungs are cone-shaped, you can get them almost completely full by opening up the base with just a small movement of the diaphragm. It can be a barely noticeable movement will mostly inflate the lungs, enough for sedentary activity at least. Your chest, your ribs, that's your thoracic cage, which houses the lungs. Without even moving that thoracic cage, we can almost fully expand our lungs. And so one technique is just to try to slow down our breathing and train our bodies to use that oxygen more efficiently. Most people are breathing somewhere around 14 times a minute, but you can train yourself to get on with 7 or 8 fewer breaths. You can take more measured breaths, but if they're deeper, you're not going to starve yourself of oxygen. You can feel that. It's automatically regulated to some extent, but you can consciously slow it down. In other words, deep breathing, I just want to reiterate this. If you get one thing out of this workshop, I want it to be that deep breathing doesn't refer to a greater overall volume of oxygen. It refers to a mode of breathing where you're filling in from the bottom of the cone. And if you're doing it correctly, then your stomach should come out. Your chest shouldn't move very much at all. So Nate's going to talk about the two parts of the autonomic nervous system. That's the sort of involuntary part of our nervous system that's located in all throughout the body. But he's going to get to that with the section on Wim Hof breathing. But just briefly in passing, diaphragmatic breathing, this is the rest and digest mode, while the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. Next, I want to move on to a technique that I've melded together from some techniques from the Feldenkrais method, body awareness, and the MoveNat system. So this is something that they've done at just about every MoveNat workshop or certification I've been to, teaching diaphragmatic breathing and doing this self-assessment. We already kind of covered this one of diaphragmatic breathing, but to really learn to favor the diaphragm as opposed to the chest, you need to know what it feels like also to breathe through your chest. So after doing the self-assessment with the diaphragmatic breathing, next you kind of put your hands on your rib cage, on the sides of your rib. I'll just show this here. You can kind of just place your hands on the side of your rib cage and try to inflate now the rib cage out to the side. So now I'm doing not it's not incorrect, but it's a method that wouldn't feel natural as a regular form of breathing. So here we go. I'm just gonna try to inflate using my it's the intercostal muscles, inner intercostals, which are on the inside of the ribs, and then the outer intercostals on the outside of the ribs. You want to put your hands, kind of find your sternum and just wrap them around right here. Then you can return to normal breathing or return to a diaphragmatic breath. Then you can try the same thing for the chest. Breathing with your chest. Trying now to inflate your chest as much as possible. You can do this lying down. It's good to spend a couple minutes with each one, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep moving on. You've got the clavicles, these bones right here. All of these are just different ways of doing the same thing, expanding your lungs, requiring more or less energy. And I notice with the ones where I'm using my chest that it gives my mind a different feeling as well. It's activating that sympathetic nervous system. I feel a little bit more kind of like I'm ready to go into a fight or something like that. If you have a partner, you can have them put their hands on your back, and you try to breathe into their hands, which sounds a little bit strange, but give it a try and see how it feels. Just kind of breathing into your back. That should be distinct from your chest, should be distinct from your rib cage, distinct from your diaphragm. And then lastly, you can try one where you just breathe by elongating your spine. So it's playing around with your thoracic cage, noticing all these different muscles. You've got your serratus muscles, which are on the outside upper part of the ribs. You've got your scapula, the bones on your back. But the main actor in this is the diaphragm, and you're learning how to isolate the diaphragm from the rest of these muscles, seeing how they work, but then mainly the goal of this is to become more aware of your diaphragm. So this is just general body awareness technique, and again, it's about gaining conscious control of these muscles so that you're actively awakening the parts of your body that have been dormant, bring it into conscious control, and then eventually it will become subconscious again. So Nate, now I want you to take it away, talking about the Wim Hof Method and a little bit more about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, as Charlie kind of touched on earlier, the sympathetic is basically your fight or flight, and the parasympathetic is basically your rest and digest. And so what does that mean? So let's give a few examples of each. So the sympathetic nervous system, this is something we activate when we experience danger or need. This trigger springs the sympathetic nervous system to life, so it activates it. And when it's activated, it increases your stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, for example. Your digestion shuts down, immune function diminishes, so the very thing keeping you healthy, your immune system it starts to diminish and shut down because it's not very important at this moment, is what you're telling your body. That's what the signal is telling your body. And then also your higher brain functions switch off. So whenever you activate this fight or flight, it's more important for you to survive this moment than start repairing and rebuilding. So you can't be doing both at the same time, really. And from a visual perspective, we're very visual creatures, right? So everything, most of the information we receive is through our eyes. And from a visual perspective, we get tunnel vision, right? That's when you get tunnel vision. You start to narrow in on everything and get to a single-minded focus. So you block everything out and you get to a single-minded focus. You're just basically focusing on the threat at hand. Now, in a primitive time, that may be the noise in the bush you're walking by. You know, what was that noise? You put all your focus into that, because that can determine, you know, in this moment, your survival. And that's more important than, you know, kind of healing from maybe an injury you have or some kind of sickness you may have, right? So sympathetic is basically, you know, fight or flight. You get tunnel vision and you shut down all these higher brain functions and things that keep you healthy over the long term. It's about immediate survival versus long-term health. Now, parasympathetic, you rest and digest. This is when your immune system activates. This is when your intestines absorb nutrients. This is when your cells repair themselves. And this is when you start to use that higher brain function. This is when you start to use more of your mind, right? This is when you're more mindful. And again, back to the visual example, this is when your vision expands. This is when you have to see more in your environment and you start to open up to more possibilities. And with this example, you can clearly see how this really affects your whole life. You know, if you're constantly walking around in tunnel vision, obviously you're going to miss out on some great opportunities. You're going to be shut down, literally and figuratively, from the world around you. So you can really see how important it is to master your breath, because when you're not breathing properly, you're missing out on a lot of life. You're not really getting all that you can out of life. And so when you do breathe properly, when you start to switch your default mode into long-term health and sustainability and higher brain functioning, and you're open to the possibilities, that's when you can, you know, live a better life, simply put. And of course, there's a time and place for everything, right? There's a time when activating that sympathetic nervous system is very important, but that time is very little. It's a very little amount of time, and the places where it's actually helpful is pretty limited as well, especially in modern times. You know, we have much less threats, but we somehow start to make things threatening, or we start to trigger that response when it's not actually needed. An example would be traffic. You know, that's a modern day example. If you're constantly in fight or flight for the whole traffic ride home, that's a long time to be in fight or flight. That's a long time to have your immune system shut down and be closed off to the world around you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into another technique. And we're going to get into the Wim Hof Method technique. So this is something I've been practicing and adapting and teaching for years now. And you know, I've done a few workshops myself and also taught this in a few workshops as well. And this is something I have a daily practice with. So this is something that I really came to understand the power from. And everyone I teach as well, I've seen immediate benefits in, and everyone tells me after doing this, they feel better than they've ever felt before. Likely just because they've never had that much oxygen in their blood system, you know, in their body. And so this technique is very powerful for that reason. It hyperoxygenates your body and really livens you up. So this technique, we're going to go through it, and we can do this. It'll take a little bit of time, not very long, and I'll probably keep talking as you do it. But you can also take notes. There'll be notes afterwards if you want to do it afterwards as well. And so this breathing technique, when done correctly, it can have you feeling very lightheaded. It can have you feeling very light-bodied and give you tingling sensations throughout. So it's recommended to do this sitting or lying down comfortably. You know, you don't want to be standing up. You don't want to be in cold water where you can potentially fall or, you know, anything like that. So for the technique itself, you're going to start off by inhaling deeply all the way in. and using that full breath we were talking about before, right? But this is going to be a very rapid breath. So even starting out, it might be better for you to do it through your mouth, because it's going to be very rapid breathing. And we're going to do 30 to 40 breaths. So step 1, 30 to 40 breaths, inhale deeply. That's going to be the rhythm. That's going to be the pace. So you're going to do 30 to 40 of those breaths. Sometimes you could get so lightheaded that you can forget to keep count. So alternatively, you can set a 2-minute timer and just forget about it until the timer goes off. Deep breaths, just like that. Now, after you do those 30 to 40 breaths, or about 2 minutes, you're going to exhale all the way. After you exhale all the way, you're going to hold it for as long as possible in an exhale hold. So I'll let you go ahead and continue with that. Continue those 30 to 40 breaths, and really focusing on the inhale and having a relaxed exhale. So you're trying to get all the way in and just relaxing out. You're not trying to go all the way out. Good. So now that's maybe about 30 to 40 breaths. So all the way in and exhale all the way out, and just relax on the exhale and hold. Now what you're going to do is you're going to hold it for 1 to 2 minutes at least. This is a good range to start. It might be difficult. Charlie's got a timer up on the screen if you can see. And you just want to hold it as long as possible and just relax, And this is your time to meditate, right? And so 1 to 2 minutes is a great start. And know that with practice over time, you can get up to 3 minutes, no problem. One thing I've noticed myself is 1 minute feels pretty good. 2 minutes feels amazing. And once you get to 3 minutes, it starts to get, into this otherworldly type of feeling. Yep. So hold for as long as possible. And now when you can no longer hold, I want you to hold for another 10 seconds. Allow your stomach to spasm a little bit. This is okay. This is okay if there's a little movement with your diaphragm. And then inhale all the way. And hold and tense your whole body. Squeeze your head, toes, torso, everything from head to toe. Really tense. Make a poopy face is one of what my instructors told me. And just tense everything for about 15, 20 seconds. And then after tensing, relax. Exhale. Nice.
Woo!
Nice. So if you just did that technique, I want you to comment in the chat, said, how do you feel? Scale of 1 to 10. If you're on Facebook Live, comment 1 to 10. How do you feel?
Well, I'll just speak to this while people are typing.
Yeah.
And I've done what I thought was Wim Hof breathing many times, but I've never actually done it in that exact way. And so thank you for presenting it in that way. To do it live makes a big difference. To hold on the exhale is a lot harder than holding on an inhale.
Yes.
So breathing holding your breath without oxygen in your lungs, that was tricky. By a minute, by 45 seconds, I was really feeling it. I was like, am I gonna fail this challenge on my own webinar?
Right. And when the first time we do it, a minute is great. That should be the goal. Aim for a minute. And then after some practice, because it really is just getting used to it. Your body thinks that you don't have any oxygen. It's worried you haven't took any air in for a whole minute. And so it starts to get some tension, and your brain starts telling you need to breathe in. But really, for the past 2 minutes, 30 to 40 breaths, you were just packing oxygen in. You were satiating your whole body with oxygen. So it's flowing through you. It's inside of you. You don't really need to take any more breath in. And so it's just learning to control that, learning to relax and stay calm and hold it for longer and longer. And also really getting comfortable with the diaphragm spasms. That's a tricky thing for many people is getting comfortable with that. And that will help you hold it for longer.
I think you had an exercise that goes along with this, or something that you can do as an added bonus.
Yeah. So the exhale hold is the place to start, right? But now, say you're doing some cold immersion, you know, you're sitting outside in the snow and you want to get used to the cold. Another option you can do is the inhale hold. So you do everything the same except for exhaling and holding. You inhale and hold. And what this does is activate what's called the inner fire. You'll likely notice, I've noticed it myself, many people notice it, that a warm sensation internally from the inhale hold. So that's another option. And then a bonus for you guys, if you really enjoyed this, you can really take this to the next level after doing this for a while, you know, and if you want to take it to another level, what you can do is push-ups on the exhale hold. And so say what's best to do actually is to start with a baseline before you do that. Start with a baseline test of your max push-ups before doing the breathing technique. So say your max is 15 push-ups, full, you know, push-ups. Then go ahead and do that breathing technique we just went over. And then on the exhale hold, do as many push-ups as you can, right? And what many people find is you can actually do more push-ups after exhaling all of the air out of your lungs than you could just regularly. And this is, again, because you're hyper oxygenating your body, and you're supercharging yourself pretty much. So that's a good bonus to try. And if you do that, you know, while listening or something, or after this, be sure to let us know how your test went.
Awesome. Yeah, so I want to move along to the next technique, which is a free diving technique called the oxygen and CO2 tables. These are used by a lot of, you know, the cave, whether it's cave divers or people that are trying to hold their breath underwater longer. But in researching this, I found that there are some pretty incredible benefits to holding your breath, even if you're not going underwater. You know, props if you can get to a body of water, but the capacity to hold your breath increases your what we call metabolic conditioning. That's your cell's ability to metabolize oxygen into CO2 and to turn the energy from your bloodstream into physical action. So when we overbreathe, when we breathe too much, we're getting rid of CO2, which might seem good, but actually we need some of that CO2 in our cells in order for them to make the trade for the available oxygen in our bloodstream. And the inverse of this, when we hold our breath, slows down your metabolism and heart rate and forces your cells to become more efficient with the oxygen that's available to them. One of the ways they accomplish this is through increased mitochondria production. So we all learned in grade school or middle school that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and it's responsible for this sort of production of energy within the cell. You'd be surprised by how long you can hold your breath if you learn how to sort of hold your breath and keep still, not use any unnecessary energy, and then also build up a tolerance of CO2. So the tables are a series of breath holds that are preceded by normal breathing. Free divers, again, use this to increase the amount of time they spend underwater. Starting off with the oxygen table. Can you see is that up on the screen here, the oxygen table?
Yep, that looks good now.
So the oxygen table is a 2-minute prep. We we breathe normally for 2 minutes. We can do a little bit of that controlled hyperventilation or breathe a little bit faster than we normally would. Quick note on nose breathing versus mouth breathing. Mouth breathing is unrestricted in the sense that the air can come in and out much more rapidly than if we're breathing through our nose. So if the goal is to hyperoxygenate or hyperventilate, we can use mouth breathing. But in general, we want to use nose breathing because it syncs up the respiration with certain cognitive processes. And there's a link about that in the notes that we're giving away for this. But without getting too far off track, with the oxygen table, we're going to keep the prep time constant, 2 minutes of regular breathing, while we gradually increase the amount of time that we hold our breath. So for most people, you should be able to hold your breath for around a minute at least. You can start with a minute, or if you know that you can go longer, you can go up to 1:30. When I do this, again, after doing some deep, some I shouldn't say deep breathing, some kind of heavy breathing. I can usually go for 2 minutes pretty easily on the first run, and then breathe normally for another 2 minutes. It gets easier to do longer periods of time. In just this short window, if you go up gradually, 15 or 30 seconds at a time, you might be able to work up a lot farther than you thought you would. And so when I did this, I've done this a couple times in the past couple weeks, and both times I've been able to get up to 4 minutes just using this kind of ladder function, with normal breathing in between. So this is increasing your lung capacity and increasing your body's just overall ability to hold your breath. But the next table is called the CO2 table, is specifically for building up tolerance to CO2, which is toxic at high levels in your bloodstream. But if you just allow it to accumulate for a little while and sit with that discomfort, it eventually becomes more manageable, and you're not going to do any serious damage with the lengths of time that we're talking about here. So this one, you keep the amount of time you're holding your breath constant, and you go down in terms of how long in between you're breathing normally. So it's a 2 minute normal breathing followed by a 2 minute hold, a minute 45 of normal breathing followed by a 2 minute hold. And what I like about this is it goes back to the body awareness. When you're holding your breath, you'll find that even small motions, even like, little movements of the fingers, if your mind is racing, if you're thinking about all these things, it'll start to deplete your oxygen faster, and the CO2 will accumulate a little bit faster. So learning to relax everything will help you hold your breath longer, and it's a feedback mechanism to give you a sense of how well you're controlling the different parts of your body that you might be subconsciously tensing up. So that's the CO2 and oxygen tables. Figuring out which muscles you can relax while still holding that breath in. So the only muscles that we're holding up are the muscles that it takes to sit upright, or you can do it lying down, and the muscles that it takes to hold the breath in. Each progressive hold is going to take you a little bit deeper into a meditative space. And so this is a way to come up with a sort of inspiration for whatever your mission might be too. It can feel like a chunk out of your day. If you're doing both tables in the same day, it might take you half an hour or 40 minutes to work through it. But that time is some of the best spent time in your day, because you're focusing yourself. And when you get back to whatever it is that you were doing before that, you're doing it with a renewed sense of purpose and mission. So I highly recommend this. It's good for your metabolic conditioning. You can get fit without lifting a finger. So that's the free diving technique. And I wanted to get into a couple other advanced techniques. We're coming up on about 45 minutes. So I don't think we're going to spend too long on this, and then we can get into a short Q&A if people do have questions. I don't want to spend too long on these techniques because I'm not a trained expert in these, unlike Nate, who's more of a trained expert in the Wim Hof Method. Warning in advance, I am not a trained expert in either Systema or holotropic breathwork. But these are two techniques that I find really interesting and that I've tried to incorporate into my training, both training other people and just working by myself. The gist of Systema is it's a martial art. It's these Russian breath masters who are kind of like the special ops, and they're intense guys, but they're also insanely calm. If you watch these YouTube videos, they have this unreal composure about them. And the technique is basically when you're in a fight, when you're striking someone or being struck, you learn how to breathe at just the right moment, particularly controlling your exhales so that strike lands with the most force, or if you're being struck, you can absorb it a little bit. And so basically, if you quickly exhale, in that moment that you're exhaling, the pressure in your body goes down slightly, and that allows you to absorb a shock or to deliver more power. And there's some techniques that I get into in the notes in a little bit more detail that you can do to practice that technique. There's also a lot of great YouTube videos where people are doing, whole hour plus long sessions, and there's some great demos. But the one technique that we can practice just briefly here is what's called square breathing, sometimes also called box breathing. And this is just a technique where you're taking account of some number. You could start off with 2 seconds. You can start off with 3 seconds. I'm going to do 2 seconds, and then I'm going to climb up a ladder to 5 seconds. So the box breath, a la Systema, works like this. I'm going to come back to my screen. It's a 2 second inhale, 2 second hold, 2 second exhale, 2 second hold, 2 second inhale, 2 second hold, 2 second exhale, 2 second hold, 3 second inhale, 3 second hold, 3 second exhale. I think you get the picture. Breathing into my diaphragm. And this too forces you to focus on your breathing. It's another breathing meditation. And if you start off with 2 seconds, do that until you feel like moving up to 3, and go up to 4, 5, 6, 7. See how high you can go and learn to control your breath in these more precise ways. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose if you want. But definitely breathing in through the nose is most important in terms of that entrainment of your respiration with your cognitive functions. So there's also an exercise called the Systema push-up, which is where you try to use your breath as much as possible as opposed to muscular effort when you're doing something like whether it's a push-up, and then that translates into the striking and moving around. And basically you go down on the exhale, and then you take an inhale, and then you go back up on the exhale as well. Then you try to do 2 whole push-ups in a single exhale. And again, there's some great YouTube videos on the Systema push-up if you want to see how this is done. It's a little harder to present in a webinar, but this is an area if you want to go into a more advanced technique. And then lastly, I'll just say a few words about holotropic breath work, which is a technique that was developed by a psychologist actually in this field called transpersonal psychology. His name was Stanislav Grof, and he worked in the Czech Republic before coming to the United States, and explored a lot of these sort of alternative states of consciousness, and found that you could induce them without using any sort of drugs. So it's a non-drug therapy for peeling back the onion layers of consciousness, he calls it. And you lie down. Oftentimes it would be done in a group session. Everyone lies down, and they do circular breathing. So box breathing is this square where we go up, hold, exhale, hold. Circular breathing is just an inhale that leads straight into an exhale. Again, when you have unrestricted mouth breathing, you're lowering your CO2 and increasing your oxygen levels. And this is what's responsible for the shift in consciousness. When we oxygenate our blood like that over a long period of time, you can do this for 15 minutes, 10 minutes. You can do it up to 2 hours. Some of these sessions go for 2 hours long. People are trained to supervise it, and then there are often sessions afterwards where you're exploring what was going on internally and what kinds of vision or insights might have come out of that. And I've been using this here and there to just think about, what am I doing big picture? What sorts of things am I working on? Are they worthwhile expenditures of my time? Or would I be better off pursuing something completely different? So it goes back to one of those first slides where, if you're working on the wrong thing, if you're doing the wrong motions when it comes to breathing, more is not always better. So you can get better results with less effort if you go about it in a more intelligent and inspired way. And that's, I think, the power of holotropic breathing. It's also kind of a countercultural thing where it's countercultural in the sense of it's a non-drug approach. So many messages these days are take this pill or or take this and it will solve your problems. This is about going inward and using your internal resources to discover things about yourself that you might not have known before. Nate, have you, I think once you mentioned this was at the aquatic certification, that in doing Wim Hof breathing, you've had similar sorts of experiences. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so doing the Wim Hof breathing in my own practice, when I started reaching that 3-minute mark on the exhale hold, I get these really intense tingling sensations coming up through my body. And at points, I've even gotten these white lights, like this visual sensory thing. And even at one point at one of the workshops I did, we were outside and sitting down on the ground. So maybe there's just a lot more oxygen in the air or something. But I was doing this, the Wim Hof breathing at this workshop, and it became so intense. I whited out. You know how sometimes people black out, right? You fade to black and they kind of pass out. Mine was actually the opposite. I whited out, like I faded to white. I sat back and then I like came right back up, and it was like, whoa. It was a really intense experience. So yeah, and it seems a bit different than the blackout. The blackout is usually probably from the opposite, probably a lack of oxygen. This whiteout was probably like a hyper oxygenated phenomena, you know.
Right. And it wasn't like the tunnel of death, or what was the?
No.
Okay.
Go into the white light. Yeah.
Don't go, Nate. Don't go toward the light. Come back.
Yeah. No, it was a really, really intense, really pleasurable experience. Felt really good.
Did you find that it gave you any sort of feeling of direction, or did it change the way that you approach anything in your life?
Yeah, I mean, just the daily practice of it is really, really helped bring clarity to my mornings. You had mentioned, this bringing clarity to your mission, and that's exactly right. It's part of my routine, my rising rituals, as I call them, is not only the movement that I talk about all the time, also this breathing practice and a meditation. And really, it brings such clarity to my morning, to all my mornings that I do it. And I notice a difference, say, if I wake up and have some kind of priority that takes over, and I'm not able to do it right away. I notice there's a big difference in how I feel and my actions and my thought process and it really affects everything.
Yeah.
And so it's super important.
Yeah, just that sort of centering.
Yeah.
It's a good way to start the day.
For
so
sure.
Let's kind of recap some of what we talked about. We've been through the basic techniques, the body awareness, diaphragmatic breathing, this idea that a deep breath is not about how much oxygen you take in, it's about where the air goes. And so you can get a more measured deep breath that becomes unconscious. If you're currently using your chest, or I find I'm most likely to, this stuff goes out the window if I'm at my computer. I'm hunched over the screen. I'm stressed out about something. Then suddenly the cue for me is if I let out a sigh. Most people think of the sigh as the deep breath, but that's a sign that I'm not actually breathing deeply.
Right.
Like I've been in that sympathetic nervous system mode, the fight or flight, even though I'm just looking at a computer screen. Nate, you want to recap the Wim Hof?
Yeah, the Wim Hof, real simple, 30 to 40 breaths or 2 minutes. Exhale, hold for as long as you can, and hold longer. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Inhale and intense your whole body from head to toe for about 15, 20 seconds. And the alternative is the inhale, hold. And another option is to the exhale, hold with push-ups as your after the exhale, hold. So as your body has no oxygen in it. And then for the parasympathetic versus sympathetic, basically this is your fight or flight for your sympathetic. And this is your tunnel vision. This is when you're single-minded focus. This is when you're closed off to opportunities. And the parasympathetic is when you're more open, your visual cortex, you can see more, you're open to more opportunities, and you're in rest and digest mode, long-term health mode.
Yep. And I talked a little bit about the free diving techniques for metabolic conditioning. This is good for everyone, not just free divers, a way to increase your CO2 tolerance and adapt to low levels of oxygen. So that's the O2 table and the CO2 table respectively. And again, all of this stuff will be summarized in the notes. And those of you who are registered for the webinar will be the first to access that. But anyone can access that. If you're watching this on Facebook, there's a link in the description to a little opt-in. So if you get on our mailing list, we'll be sure to send that your way. Nate, let's see, we've got a couple other just kind of housekeeping announcements here.
Yeah. So if we talked about the Movement at Aquatics course and how huge that was for both of us. So we're going to leave a link for you guys. We're going to send it in the newsletter. And there's one upcoming in March for the aquatics. Highly recommended from both of us. Super powerful course. You'll learn a lot. And you'll see a lot of benefit from that.
Right. And for those of you who want to experience these breathing techniques and master your movement skills while learning some practical self-defense skills along the way, join Nate in Costa Rica this September for his PURA VIDA immersion retreat. He's got a gift for those of you who have stayed to the end. If you enter the code breathe in 2020, this is, there we go. Breathe in 2020. This will give you $400 off on the registration. Can't emphasize how much these immersive experiences work to rewire that unconscious incompetence. And I'm sure that Nate, you probably learn a lot whenever you do these things.
Oh yeah. I learned a ton. I learned probably just as much as anyone else there. Yeah, super beneficial.
Yeah, and be sure to check out what Nate is up to at originalhumanmovement.net, even if Costa Rica is not in the offing for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that wraps up the content that we have prepared, but we're happy to take any questions that people might have. We've got still some glad you guys stuck around.
Yeah, we had one question earlier. Someone typed in, they asked if it was going to be available for replay later, just in case they had to go. And yes, this will be available for replay. We'll send you guys a replay link after this.
Yep. So any other questions? Speak now or forever hold your breath. Nate, what movement these days is really getting you fired up outside of breathing? What kind of stuff are you doing?
Man, for me lately, my latest deep dive has been into this idea of invisible jiu-jitsu. So if you guys follow me, or if you're completely, maybe you don't know, but I've been training Brazilian jiu-jitsu for 4 or 5 years now. And somewhere along the way, I learned that jiu-jitsu isn't just jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of different, niches within the niche, right? And one of them, one of the lineage under Hickson Gracie is he has these invisible details that are, and it's called invisible jiu-jitsu because they're kind of invisible to the eye, but you can really feel them when you apply them. So there's really minute adjustments to these things, like we talked about today with breathing. Like most people think of a deep breath as just right. That's not actually a deep breath. That's just kind of like a sigh. And so it might sound the same, but the invisible detail would be, no, you're actually using different muscles. You're using your diaphragm. You're not using your chest as much. And so the same principle applied to jiu-jitsu has been really fascinating me, learning all these details that make these self-defense techniques really practical, really adaptable, and actually effective, right? Yeah,
and you use MoveNet for conditioning and everything in jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah. So I started MoveNet well before our jiu-jitsu, and the crossover, because moving at such a broad system, you learn the foundation for your movement. And when you have that foundation, like I did, you progress so quickly through whatever it is you're doing. For me, my jujitsu just progressed super quickly. And anyone who does movement says the same thing, whether it's jujitsu or whatever sport it is, because movement really gives you that foundation of natural movement skills. So then you can go on to your sport and really excel.
Right on.
Yeah.
And we both have been doing some walking of late.
Oh yeah. We both did quite a bit of walking. I just did 27K for my 27th birthday.
Nice.
Yeah, it became a little.
I didn't put that together. I didn't put it together that it was related to your birthday.
Yeah, I picked that up from Katie Bowman. She started doing miles per year. So I know last time I checked, she did 41 miles for her 41st birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, that inspired me.
Yeah. Nice. I know how 41 miles feels now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to say that a few days ago, but
yeah,
I did try to do my 3 bridge loop. Not quite a loop, because the half of the Bay Bridge is still closed to pedestrians. But it also turns out that the Golden Gate Bridge is closed to pedestrians after 6:30 p.m. So I could have probably found that out before, but I think that's a new measure, it's sort of an anti-suicide measure, I guess. So I get to the Golden Gate after walking across the other 2 bridges that circle the San Francisco Bay. And the gatekeeper sadly told me that the Golden Gate was not open, except to bicycles. And I thought about waiting for a bike and then just making a run for it. But
what? Except the bicycle?
Yeah, the commuters. Okay.
So you can ride your bike and then start to walk the rest of the way, I guess.
Yeah, you could do that. You could get off and walk, or I was going to get morbid and say, never mind. But but it was a great experience, and I learned a lot about efficient walking technique just by the sheer distance. Teaches you I'm a big proponent of this idea that nature is our teacher.
Yeah.
And whether it's the earth, the ground beneath our feet, teaches you how to improve your efficiency by sort of punishing bad form, you could say, and rewarding good form.
Right.
I started to notice, okay, it hurts when I walk like this. It's more comfortable if I really extend my leg backwards. The breathing did play a big role. I found that, taking measured breaths through my nose was a way to rejuvenate myself throughout. And you can't rely on food for your energy on those long walks. You need to have the metabolic conditioning. It needs to be inside of you and at the cellular level. So I think that the breathing work that I did leading up to this really helped with that. And I do plan on trying it again, leaving a little bit earlier sometime.
Yeah, man, I honor you for going for that 50-mile JFK march. That is awesome. And I think we should maybe, if our schedules align, just try to do that together. That'd be freaking awesome.
That would. I know that you're going to be spending more time in California. So if you ever, or if you're going to be in Northern California, let's plan on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any questions, so I guess we can just wrap it up there. But I want to thank everyone for coming, and I especially want to thank you, Nate, for joining me for this.
Yeah, happy to do it, man. Good times.
So again, everyone out there, stay tuned for the link to the PDF notes, and let us know what you think. Send us an email, and hope to see you out there, walking, breathing, and moving naturally.
Yes. Take care, guys. See you.
All right. Bye, Nate.